A few years ago, my wife and I bought this piece of property and we've planted some things out there. An apple tree, cherry tree, some bushes that we want to create a privacy barrier and stuff. And it gets really hot out there in the summer and dry. We have a long dry period. And it's not that long, but the plants clearly are suffering from lack of water, and it inhibits their growth, and we want them to grow faster, but we don't have any, it's just property. There's no water out there. We don't have a well. We don't have water to the property. So plants are kind of on their own unless we water them, and that means we have to carry the water out to the plant and pour it on there. So, which we have done, but it's a lot of work, and I've been thinking about and trying to find out what else we can do for these plants. And I've recently discovered something called mycorrhizal fungi. Myco meaning mushrooms or fungus, and rhiza meaning roots, like rhizomes. So it's a kind of fungus, a particular kind of fungus that forms a relationship with plants. And different plants have different mycorrhizal fungi that form partnerships with them, and some this is too much detail, but some mycorrhizal fungi can form relationships with multiple plants. Some plants can form relationships with multiple fungi, and so on. But anyway, it's a kind of fungus, and basically it connects with the roots. The fungus grows in long strings, long strands, and one of these strands will go into the root and sometimes into the cell and forms a bond with the cell. And it's being invited by the plant to do this. Plant roots actually send out a signal, like a chemical signal under the ground, and the fungus and the mycorrhizal fungi grow toward that signal and then connect up with the roots, and they form a bond. And what happens is the tree voluntarily gives the fungus sugars, and the fungus voluntarily gives the tree phosphorus and other nutrients, minerals, and water. And it can really increase the amount of water that a plant has available to itself if it has this mycorrhizal fungi. One of the books that I read, which I thought was really good, really interesting, was called Teaming with Fungi by Jeff Lowenfels. And it's about how to use mycorrhiza if you're growing stuff. But here's a quote. I wanted to read this quote because it just blew my mind when I read it. The existence of mycorrhiza can help host plants be more tolerant of drought conditions. Studies have demonstrated that from 50 to 100 times more water is available to plants when their roots associate with mycorrhizal fungi and form mycorrhiza. Mycorrhizal fungi create water storage structures in the roots where they are needed. The net of mycorrhizal fungal hypha branches, the fungal hypha branches, surrounds plant roots and holds water, acting as a storage reservoir. The interface between some hypha and the host plant, the hypha are like the long strands, and the host plant root cells also holds water, as do vesicles, those special storage organelles inside the roots. This is a significant benefit of mycorrhiza. It is also important from an ecological standpoint, as agriculture accounts for about 70% of all water use worldwide, and mycorrhizal plants require less water during dry periods, unquote. So that I was just like, oh, that's the answer. That's the answer. And it turns out people sell mycorrhizal fungi, bags of it. So it's kind of like a powder. There's a whole bunch of different kinds, and each one that I've seen is multiple strains. Like the one I've bought 2 different kinds now, and there are like 15 different mycorrhizal fungi strains inside the bag. And all you do is when you're transplanting a plant, you can just sprinkle it down and then put the plant roots right on top of it. Or you can mix it with water and just pour it on an already existing plant. So we've done this. We just did it this year. I don't know if it's going to have any benefit, but you can look on YouTube and there's all kinds of videos showing, well, here, this plant we put the fungus in and this plant we didn't. And usually what you see is the one with the fungus, the mycorrhizal fungi, has grown a lot more, has a lot more roots, looks a lot healthier, and so on. So it's really interesting. Apparently, this relationship between these fungi and plants goes way back. It's an ancient relationship, and it's been developing over a long time. Both organisms have been developing and evolving together like this for a long time. So it's very sophisticated the way they do it. But one of the ways that it gives the plant more water is that it has these storage structures and so on. But another way it does it is it extends the reach of the roots. Mycorrhizal fungi, the little hypha, the little threads, are really, really, really small, very thin. They can reach a lot further, and there's a lot more of them than the roots of the plant. So when it rains, you can imagine it's a bigger net catching the water that's soaking through the dirt. So it's a bigger net. There's more individual fibers collecting this water, and it can store water. So it really benefits the plant a lot. And there's some places where probably the plants can't survive without the fungus. There was one example also in that book let's see, in 1902, in a pioneering study, G.N. Wysotsky demonstrated that areas of treeless Russian steppe, that is prairie, could support forest trees by adding mycorrhizal fungi taken from forest soils. This was the first successful use of the soil transfer of mycorrhizal fungi from one area to another. It showed the importance of the appropriate association between mycorrhizal fungi and host plant, unquote. I thought that was interesting. So basically, there was an area that didn't have any trees growing in it, and they put the fungus in there, and trees could now grow in it. It was that important. Now, this is Russian steppe. It's probably cold, dry. It's an area that, you wouldn't expect trees to grow, but they're capable of growing if they're in association with these fungi. On another note, there's a researcher in Vancouver. Her name is Susan Simard, who's been doing really interesting. This is Vancouver, BC. I'm talking about Canada. She's been doing some studies on the forest, the fungi in the forest, and how they connect trees to each other and can apparently signal each other through the fungus. They can give nutrients and sugars to each other, and water. And she's just done all kinds of interesting studies. One of the first ones she did was she took, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related trees, although she did find that say there's a mama tree, right? And around it are many little trees growing, some of which are direct offspring of this mama tree, and some are not. And she found that this mama tree selectively gives nutrients and water to her offspring and not the other ones, which I thought was interesting. And they're not connected directly, they're connected through the fungus, which is mind-blowing, I think. And then she found they don't even necessarily have to be related. She found she took two trees. She did this experiment a whole bunch of times, but she took two trees that were about 3 feet tall each, that were pretty close to each other. And she put plastic bag over each one, and then filled one. She was testing to see whether they were sharing sugars. So the main thing that trees produce is sugars, and then they manufacture things out of these sugars. So wood itself is made out of sugar, basically. It's the cellulose is a long chain of sugars. If you were able to break cellulose apart, it would just be sugar. Anyway, so she put the bags over each of these trees. Now, one is a deciduous tree, and one was an evergreen tree. And then she put it's like a radioactive carbon into one of the bags to see if any of those radioactive carbons ended up in the other tree. And it did. And what she found was, over time, was that the deciduous tree, which has no leaves in the winter, but is catching more sun in the summer, the deciduous tree was giving sugars to the conifer tree during the summer, and the conifer tree was giving sugars to the deciduous tree during the winter, when it wasn't able to manufacture any of its own. So they were sharing sugars through the fungus. Wild. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I didn't know if, I didn't know about this. I had never heard about this before. And if you want to see this researcher, she does a really good TED Talk called How Trees Talk to Each Other. Susan Simard. And it's a fascinating thing, and could actually potentially really make a difference in our water use, especially for if you want to grow anything. It's something worth looking into. So that is, I'm Adam Lee Kahn on the Atom Bomb. There's a couple of things I forgot to tell you on that first recording. This is sometime later. First of all, I thought it was interesting that, plants give a certain amount of sugars to the fungus in exchange for what the fungus can give to the plant. And plants sometimes give up to 1/3 of the sugars that they produce. I mean, that's what they produce. That's what they use to make leaves. That's what they use to make roots and wood and flowers. And sugar is their lifeblood. That's what they're up there in the leaves producing. And they find that fungus so valuable that they sometimes give up to 1/3 of the sugars they produce to the fungus. I thought that was interesting. Second thing was that 95% of plants are capable of having a relationship with mycorrhiza fungi. That's almost all plants have some relationship, or are capable of having some relationship with plants, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's so valuable to both the fungus and the plants that they almost always form this relationship if they can. And the third thing I wanted to say is that just recently I was thinking, because we're trying to grow bamboo out on our property, and it's not really doing well. And we bought bamboo that's capable of growing in this area, and we bought it from I think it's the biggest bamboo nursery in the country, and it's not too far from here. And all the plants that they sell are ones that are capable of growing here. So I thought, okay. But our plants are doing badly. So I wrote to them and asked them about it. And they said, well, you really have to water it regularly for its first 5 years. I'm like, okay, well, we can't do that. We don't really have we can't lug that much water out there, and we're not out there often enough. So we can't do that. So I was trying to think what else I could do. And then I was thinking, okay, mycorrhizal fungi, let's do that. So I wrote to them, because I don't know what kind of fungus I should get for bamboo. So I wrote to them and I asked them if they use mycorrhizal fungi, and they said they do. And I said, what strains? And they gave me the names of the strains. And then I thought, well, I bought my bamboo from them 4 years ago, I think it's 3 or 4 years ago. So maybe it already has the fungus. If it had it in the pot when I stuck the pot, when I transplanted the bamboo plants into the ground, then it probably already has the fungus. So I asked them, when did you start doing this, using this mycorrhizal fungi? And they said, last spring. So they just started using it. So I said, where do you get yours, or do you sell it? They don't sell it, but they gave me the name of the place that they got it from, and I wrote to them, and I can get it from them. But I thought it was interesting that the research is so new. I mean, this is a really big and well-established bamboo nursery, and they just started using it. So you now know something of the latest info. All right, so this is Adam Kahn on the Atom Bomb.